When at last her eyes did open, Gilda scrambled quickly from the bed, not bothering to take a measurement with her leg. Gilda had faster growth on her mind. She slipped into yesterday's dress, pulled on yesterday's socks, buckled up every day's shoes, and then marched into the living room, right up to the TV chair. With her shrinkoscope and the magic word, Gilda shrunk the TV chair just like she had done the day before. But instead of opening her hand to let it go back to normal size, she closed her fingers around the tiny TV chair and tucked it into her pocket. Then she did the same to the rest of the furniture. The big couch, the big chair, the big table, the big plant pots. All these were powerless before the mighty Veruca and shrinkoscope. When the living room was empty, Gilda patted her hand on a pocket full of tiny furniture and smiled. She was beginning to feel a very good feeling. It was a feeling of bigness. She took a few minutes to enjoy this feeling. It was like the first spoonful from a bowl mounded over with ice cream. Then, with her shrinkoscope at the ready and a Veruca on the tip of her tongue, she went looking for Randolph Hearst. He was in the kitchen with his face buried in a bowl of happy yappy when she found him. "Here, doggy, doggy, doggy," she called out. Randolph's floppy, hairy ears pricked up as much as they could. He was very hungry and was enjoying his dinner, but not even happy yappy, a bit of beef luxury for the dog who has everything, could keep Randolph Hearst from a chance to lick little Gilda. He let out a few gleeful barks and bounded towards her, expecting, of course, that Gilda would try to escape. But Gilda didn't run. She calmly and carefully curled her fingers into a shrinkoscope, and holding the shrinkoscope up to her eye, she spoke the magic word, Veruca, in a convincing magician-like sort of way. Poof! Randolph Hearst and his gleeful barks shrunk down to pocket size. To Gilda, the world was beginning to seem very different. She looked around her and saw many things that used to frighten her, things she used to run away from, screaming, "Too big, too big!" But now little Gilda stood her ground, looked these things in the eye, through the shrinkoscope, that is, and said Veruca. Veruca to couches and aunts, Veruca to trees and uncles, to stairs and trucks, to tables and sisters, to lawns and cousins, to brothers and houses and Grandpa Ned. Veruca. Soon her pockets were full to bursting with the things she'd shrunk, but Gilda didn't stop. She got herself a shoulder bag and carried right on, shrinking streets, lampposts, houses, forests, farms, and lakes. Gilda was determined to continue until she herself, little wee Gilda, was the biggest thing left in sight. She saw a row of mountains off in the distance. Normally it would have taken days and days to walk to them, but clever Gilda just shrank the fields and hills between her and the mountains, and was there in no time. "Hello," said Gilda to the mountains. "Hello, hello, hello," said the mountains. "How does it feel to be really big?" Gilda asked. "It feels great," said one mountain. "Yes, great," added another, "and we should know because we mountains are just about the biggest things there are." "Well, maybe you are," Gilda teased. "What do you mean, maybe?" bellowed all of the mountains at once, scowling and grumpy gray. "Well, what I mean is, have you ever stopped to think that you might actually be very tiny? Small enough to fit into this bag." Gilda showed the mountains her shoulder bag. "Ha, ha, ha, ha!" Mountain-sized laughs tumbled like boulders down from the peaks. "Ha, ha, ha, ha!" And while the mountains were laughing, Gilda shrunk them all, one by one, and put them into her bag. Gilda shrunk the clouds, rain, lightning, and all. She shrunk towns and cities, sand dunes and glaciers, tropical islands and the oceans around them. Gilda shrunk the earth itself, the moon, the sun, the planets, and the stars. And then at last she stopped. There was nothing to be seen, nothing to be heard, and nothing at all to be shrunk. Gilda looked about her, and seeing nothing larger than herself, she felt satisfied. Little wee Gilda was now the tallest of the tall, the largest of them all, and the farthest thing from small. She looked out into the nothingness, and wondered what to do next. But while she looked and wondered, her feeling of bigness melted away. There was something still bigger than Gilda, and boy was it big. Bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Gilda had shrunk everything in order to be the biggest thing herself, but all she'd really done was to create an empty space of tremendous size. The farther she looked into that space, the further it went. No word could describe it. The space was not just huge, not simply gigantic, not merely colossal, but Gilda knew a word for it. "Veruca!" she cried, and shrunk the space to pocket size. But that just left another space, every bit as gargantuan as the first one. Surrounded by this space, Gilda felt smaller than she had ever felt in her entire life. Tiny, alone, and frightened, Gilda uncurled the fingers of her shrinkoscope and began nibbling on her nails. Afraid as she was, Gilda didn't panic. She thought carefully to herself, if the space cannot be shrunk, it will have to be filled. Reaching quickly into her shoulder bag, Gilda pulled out shrunken planets and stars and returned each to normal size with a snap of her fingers. Then out came the moon, the sun, and the earth. "Ooh," said the moon. "Ah," said the sun. Said the earth. All three felt quite relieved to be out of Gilda's little bag. Gilda, too, felt relieved to be standing on the earth again, but there still remained far too much of that empty space about for her liking, and so she filled more of the space with the things from her bag. Gilda pulled out clouds and oceans, sand dunes and mountains, glaciers and forests, and carefully put each back in its proper place, back to its proper size. And when at last she'd finished the bag, Gilda went on to empty her pockets. Putting things back seemed much harder work than shrinking them had been. But eventually Gilda found herself back in her very own living room. The last thing out of her pocket had been the first thing to go in, the TV chair. When it too had returned to its proper size, Gilda sighed deeply. She could see almost none of that horrible empty space. Just scattered bits of it were left here and there. Gilda pulled herself up into the arms of the TV chair with a last mighty effort, and there she fell fast asleep. When she awoke, much to her relief, no one seemed to remember the way she had treated them, shrinking them and stuffing them into her pockets. Nowadays, Gilda still waits for that one day to come when she will grow big, and with each new day that wakes her she wonders, and then tests the new day with her toes, like a swimmer checking the water before diving in. For her, so far, the world remains 8 sizes too big, and from time to time she looks at the things of the world through her shrinkoscope to make them seem tiny. But she no longer feels the need to keep them that way. Gilda knows that size is nothing to be afraid of. It's just how you look at it.